Hello and welcome to the tutorial of the BCam tool which I've just created. The tool is a RTS camera solution for all kinds of projects with a top-down view. The tool has a bunch of options for configure the camera as your preferences, but by default it works perfectly. Use this tool is so simple. Once you download the tool, you'll see the folder. And if you want to understand better the tool, please read the documentation file. Okay, so we have installed the tool. So now we could see another menu at the top of the window, the Unity window, the tools menu. And maybe if you have other tools, you probably have more than one option here. But for that tool, click on the tools menu and select BCam and open window. Okay, now we've just opened the window where we are going to set the camera in the position that we want. As you can see, we can leave the camera in the position 0 of the world by default, or we can click on this button right here, which gives you the option for set the position that you want by passing a vector 3 or by a reference object. In this tutorial, we are going to pass a reference object. So we create an empty object here in the hierarchy and pass that object. Okay, and now we click on the create button and voila, we create the camera and set it in the scene at the position of the reference object. The camera has set all the configuration by default. So now, before change any field of the camera, let me show you how it works. Okay, so press the play button and let's see. So first, let me introduce you to the inputs. There are two types of controls: by keyboard, using the WASD to move, QE for rotate horizontally, EK for rotate vertically, and RF for zoom in or zoom out. As you can see, it works perfectly. Okay, and the other type of controls are with the mouse. So you can click in one point and drag to that point, and as you can see, we move the camera. Very nice. Okay, with the central button of the mouse, we can rotate around by panning around the pivot with the camera. Very nice. Okay, so the last thing, the zoom. We can scroll the wheel, so you can zoom in if you scroll up, and zoom out if you scroll down. Perfect. As you can see, the camera works perfectly by default, so you can speed up your projects a lot. Okay, now I'm going to explain some other points. First, I'll explain that white area that appears around the pivot of the camera. These are the limits of the camera. You can use that limits for adjust them to your map. And as you can see, the camera doesn't exceed that limits. Okay, you can see it. Okay, and now let me show you one of the best features of this tool, the adaptation to the environment. Okay, first we have that big sphere around the camera. That sphere detects if it's colliding with any object. In that case, I check if the object is colliding in front or if it's colliding under. If there's any object colliding in front, the camera automatically goes up until it doesn't collide with anything. If it's colliding under, the camera stops the falling, preventing it to go through the ground, as you can see. Okay, and now all the prevention is when rotate up, the camera prevents to rotate more than 90 degrees. as the same as say that the camera stops to rotate up when it's perpendicular to the floor. Okay, and that's all. The last thing I want to say is that all the moves of the camera are lerped, so you can see a pretty decent and gentle movement, so I think that's great. Well, so we see how the camera works. So now I'm going to go through all of the options of the camera control component, which you can find it in the first pivot of the camera rig. That makes sense if you think it. So here is the main theme of the tool, the gem of the camera control. Yeah, I say it. Well, let's go step by step through all the possibilities. First, we can see 3 buttons at the top: the set original pose, a button for, as the name says, for reset the original position of the camera rig, including in play mode. The other button is for reset all the values to default, as they are right now. And the last button is the settings window. So first of all, we are going to take a look at this menu. So let's open it. Perfect. Okay, so here we have 2 groups, the control settings group and the location settings group. So first, the control settings. Here you can see 2 toggles that activate or deactivate each control of the camera, the keyboard control or the mouse control. But remember one thing, you can deactivate both of them. And for prevent that to happen, I make a method that maintain one of them always activated. I'll explain that. When there's only one control type activated, if you deactivate it, it automatically activates one of them randomly. And that's all. Okay, and the location settings. These settings set the original position of the camera, the pose which the camera takes to return when we press that button right here that we mentioned before. Here we can set the location by default, so we can set it by moving and changing the pose in the scene, or we can set all the options by clicking on that button. We can set the pose via vector 3 or via reference object like in the first window. We can change the horizontally rotation, the vertically rotation, the zoom, and one thing that changes the type of movement of the zoom, more linear or more like a parabolus. Okay, by default is set it to 1. That makes a linear movement. And if we increase that value, we are going to get a beautiful parabolus. I have to mention that this is the only field that changes the type of movement and not only the original location. Very nice. That's all for the settings menu. So returning to the principal menu, let's talk about each group of fields. The key input fields, in which you can change the speed of movement with the normal speed by pressing the default keys, or the fast speed by pressing the shift plus the default keys, and we can change the rotation speed too. The mouse input fields, we can change the maximum speed that the camera can reach because we move the camera by right click on the scene and by dragging the mouse around. So the speed is taken by the speed of our mouse movement. And that's the reason for us a max speed field. Okay, we can change the rotation speed and the max rotation speed too. And one important thing is that we can have the type of panning rotation around the pivot that I showed you before, or we can just simply uncheck the toggle and has a normal horizontally rotation. With that option set, now we can change the camera inclination and the camera rig inclination. And with this, I just mean the initial vertical rotation for the camera. You can also reset that specific values to default by clicking on that button. Okay, those are the exclusive fields of each type of control. Now we are going to see the common fields with two groups, the zoom fields and the lerp fields. In the zoom fields, we can change the zoom speed and the min and max zoom that we can have. And in the lerp fields, we can set the speed of the lerp. Okay, very easy until this point. Now let's see the limit field space, in which we can select what type of shape we want for the presentation of the map limits in which the camera can move. A box with width and height, regular if we want a square, or not if we want a rectangle, or we can select the circle with a radius field. Very well, we are at the last space, the check fields space, with a configuration for the visuals of the gizmos, so we can activate them or not, and change the colors too. But remember, that group of fields is just for the visuals. They continue working even if we deactivate them. So that's great. And finally, we can change the raycasting fields for the camera adaptation to the environment that I mentioned before. First, we can change the radius of detection of the big sphere and set the frontal check and vertical check distance equal to that value by clicking in that button. Okay, and we can change the radius of the frontal detection sphere, because I don't use a raycast, I use a spherecast for the detection. So you can also change that values by unchecking the toggle mentioned before. Very nice. Okay, and that's all. Superb. We finished the tutorial. Now you know all the necessary for configure all the fields and set the RTS camera of your dreams, and for all kind of projects, as to say it. Well, it has been a pleasure to share my tool with all the world. See you next time, and bye bye.